What's going on, guys? Now that I am back, it is time to do some more work on the turbo minivan project. In today's video, I'm going to be trying to get the head pretty much all assembled. This right here is just a bone stock H22A head. This is the one that came with the block that I got sleeved for this thing. And today I'm going to be trying to install these dual valve springs and titanium retainers that I got for it. These right here are SuperTech. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to be reseating all the valves, or relapping them, I guess you could say, with some valve grinding compound. I did this a while back on my wagon, and I made this homemade tool for it. It's kind of janky, but it did work. And this tool only will work on a single cam head and will not work on a dual overhead cam like this H22 is right here. So I did order a spring compressor tool. This one will hopefully be really easy to use. I've never used one of these, but I can imagine it will be much better than using like a snap-on tool or the tools that require you to hold the springs down with a handle. I did that when I did the springs and retainers on my hatch, and those tools are a real pain to use, where you actually have to hold it down manually while you change out the spring and retainer, and try to get those little retaining clips in, which we will get more into. So hopefully this tool works good. It's the same exact concept of how I made my tool for the wagon, except this one is much nicer quality, and and it's made for dual overhead cam cylinder heads, so it will fit the H22. The reason I'm installing these dual valve springs and titanium retainers is to get some more RPM out of the engine. If I were to leave the stock springs and retainers that are in there now, I really wouldn't feel safe revving this thing much over 8,000 RPM. I'm sure some people have taken them over that before, but when you start to rev these things out too hard on the stock springs and retainers, they'll have the tendency to start floating valves, and they'll start breaking up on the top end because the spring isn't stiff enough to snap the valve back in time for another revolution. So it starts to just cause problems on the top end, and you also really don't want a retainer to let go at those high RPMs and cause it to drop a valve, which would be really bad. It would pretty much ruin the motor. So it's always a good idea, if you're going for a pretty high horsepower and high RPM, to upgrade the springs and retainers in the cylinder head. Once I get these installed, I'll be able to safely take the engine over 9,000 RPM. For instance, my hatch has a rev limiter of 9,400 in each gear, which is pretty conservative considering I know quite a few people who have these same springs and retainers in their head, and they've taken them over 10,000 RPM with no issues. That's kind of pushing it for me. I don't think I need that much RPM, but I'll be happy with, anywhere from 9,000 to 9,500 RPM. It is a minivan after all, so I'm not trying to go super crazy with this thing on the first build that we put in there. Maybe later on down the line we'll turn her up, but for now, 9,000 to 9,500 should be plenty for this thing. Some benefits of doing this, besides just having a higher RPM, will include things like having a better power band as well. So let's say the car starts to make boost at 45 to 5,000 RPM. That's when the boost starts to climb in, and your power band is from 5,000 to 8,000, because that's when you have to shift. Doing this, you'll start building boost at 5,000, and you'll be able to carry that out for an extra 1,500 RPM, which will make your power band much better. And also, every time you shift at that higher RPM, there's a much better chance you'll fall back into your power band and not have to, fall out of boost in between shifts, and overall just make the car faster. If you had to shift at 8,000, there's a chance it might fall, under that 5,000 RPM where you make boost, and it has to, rebuild boost for a couple seconds and get back into it in each gear. So having the higher RPM will let it fall back into the power band, because when you shift, it's going to be that extra 1,500 higher up into the power band already. And it's also going to add some mile an hour into each gear. So for instance, if your second gear at 8,000 RPM maxes out at like 65, 70 miles an hour, now you can take each gear that 1,500 extra. So second gear might be seeing 85 to 90 miles an hour now, and it will add more and more mile an hour throughout the gears, because they're geared longer and longer. So by the time you hit fourth gear, this might be adding like an extra 20 miles an hour by the end of your RPM range, which is what you want, less shifting and more time in your power band. So there's a lot of benefits to doing this, and I did it on my hatch, and it's definitely a good thing to be doing. And since we're pretty much building this whole motor anyways, I figured why not, because I'm not going to do all this just to leave some stock springs and retainers in this thing. So yeah. But before I can get to work on this thing, I need to go pick up a bench grinder with a wire wheel on it. That is a tool I still do not have yet, so I'm gonna go get one right now. I will show you guys why we need that once I get back. So yeah, gonna go to Home Depot real quick, pick one up, and we'll get back to working on the cylinder head. Yeah, let's just get this one. I'm gonna grab it. And we also need to get a wire wheel for it. We need 6-inch right there. Nice. Should be good. It's time to go put this head together.
Bro, you're almost slashing me with that thing.
Nice. I've been needing one of these for so long.
Oh, she pretty.
And the time has come. So now we can make our valves all nice and pretty. All right, so now that we got the bench grinder, I'm gonna start taking all the springs and retainers apart and get them separated from the valves. So we can use the spring compressor tool to do this if we need to, but a fast way to do it that I've done on my wagon and in the hatch in the past is just to take a socket that's big enough to fit on the retainer and you know, but not too small to catch on the keepers in here, and just put an extension on it and just hammer it down. And what that will do is it will push the retainer down past the valve and the keepers, you know, will fly out. And I also have a rag under it right now, and that will help hold the valve up in place while I hammer it down. So this is just a much faster way instead of going through and tightening each and every one down just to get the keepers out, because you know, these are stock retainers and I don't really care about them as long as I'm not hurting the valve, which this shouldn't at all. I know a lot of people do it this way. This will be a lot faster way to get them apart. So I'm gonna go through and get these all apart. I already went ahead and did the first one. And yeah, I'm just gonna go through and hammer these all out. And then we'll flip the head over, pull all the valves out, and then I'm gonna relap them and I'll show you guys how to do that. And then we'll put it all back together with the new springs and retainers, and then I'll show you how to use that tool. So I'm gonna get to it right now. So that just popped one of the keepers out, and then it's also nice to have a little magnet just to collect them. So that's one of the keepers right there. I'll show you guys how that works in a second once I get them all out. So I'm just putting them into a box right here. You don't want to lose those because those things can kind of fly around if you don't keep an eye out for them. There we go. 2 hits, got the second one out. And there's the keeper. And then yeah, right from there you can just pull out the stock retainer and spring if you want. And the H22s actually do come with dual springs from factory, which is kind of cool, but they're not strong enough for the kind of RPM we want. All right, so we got all the springs and retainers out. So the valves are still in place. I'm just gonna flip this over real quick so that we can get to them. And this thing still has its head gasket on. Pop that off real quick. That looks like it's in pretty good shape. But anyways, we don't need that. Let's go over here. So I'm gonna do all the exhaust valves first, I guess. I'll just start from this one and go all the way over. These are pretty dirty, so it's gonna be pretty good to clean them up. But you do wanna try to keep the valve in the same spot that it came from. So if I'm doing this valve right here, for instance, and all you do to get these out is, you know, just push on it through the top and it'll slide right out like that. So I want to keep this one in the same hole that it came out of. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to do all these in order, and then I will do the intake valves after. So what I'm going to be doing is popping them all out like so, like I just showed you. And then this is why we need the wire wheel, because we're going to be cleaning off all this carbon, all this black crap, and it's also really built up right here on the valve as well. And first of all, it'll just be good to clean it off, but the main reason we need to clean it off right here is so that we can take our little suction cup and stick it to the valve, and then we will be able to spin it inside of where it seats. So if I don't clean this off, you're not going to be able to stick it on there. It's just not going to work. So we have to clean it off if we want to reseat all the valves. So I'm going to go through, pull them all out, and then wire wheel all of these off, and then we will get back to, you know, reseating them in their proper place, I guess you could say. So yeah, these are pretty nasty though. That's like a lot of carbon buildup. So I'm going to get all that wire wheeled off, and then we'll go from there. So we got the valve cleaned off as best as we could. You can still see some you know, residue in the middle right there where it says A7. There's like that kind of tan color stuff in there. That's still some of the soot from the exhaust, but it is really hard to get it all the way off, and we do just need the top part to be flat so we can get this suction cup on it right here. And now that it's flat enough, likes to slide around, that will be plenty. That's all we need right there, just for it to stick on. And then we also did get the valve cleaned off all the way around as well. So that's on the exhaust valve. These are the ones that are the hardest to clean because they have all this crap on them. The intake ones are really easy, those will go fast, but the exhaust valves are going to be, you know, a couple minutes to clean off each one. So this is the first one right here, and we're going to go through, get all the others cleaned, and then we'll do the intakes, and then we'll get to lapping the valves. So I'm going to get all those cleaned off, and then we'll go from there. Just for a quick comparison, this is one before we cleaned it right here on the left, and then this is one after. So a lot of carbon buildup on that one that we took off, and then if you look at the bottoms, you can get the idea right there as well. Yeah, like I said, we didn't get all the way cleaned off, but that will be plenty for what we need. They don't need to be spotless, but we're just getting them as best as we can. Bro, we are definitely working this thing way too hard. That is so hot.
It's freaking
holy
stupid.
crap. Ah! Dude, it's so hot.
It's like brand new.
Dude,
and it's so hot.
We should put like some ice on it or something.
You could like smell it, like it's roasting its motor.
I'm gonna go grab some ice for it. That's so hot. I'm surprised we didn't like burn it up, honestly.
Oh my God, I don't even know how you're touching it. It's so hot.
It was running for like an hour straight, dude. We're going hard and we're still not done yet.
Oh, but
so we gotta get this cooled off.
You can smell it. It's just
dude, it's so hot. Oh well, if it burns up, I have the receipt.
You got a bag of ice.
That'll help cool her off. We need to get this thing done, so don't want to be sitting here all night waiting for it to cool off. But I'm honestly worried if we keep running it, it's probably gonna catch on fire. Like that is so hot.
It just stinks. I don't like the smell.
Yeah, it's kind of sketch. Okay, so we got all the valves cleaned off, and I know I said in like the last video that we didn't completely clean off all the exhaust valves and that we left a little spot on there, but I was a little OCD about it, so we spent the extra time to clean them all the way off. So now they are 100% nice and clean. And yeah, so now our little suction cup valve lapping tool will stick onto those nicely, and that's what we want. So what we're going to be doing now is pulling all the valves out, and we're going to be putting some valve lapping compound underneath the valve. And this stuff pretty much is like a paste with almost like a fine grit in it. It's almost like a sandpaper in paste form, but a very fine sandpaper. And you're going to put that underneath the valve, and then you put the suction cup on it like so, and then I'll be using both hands to spin it back and forth, and that's going to help, you know, reseat the valves right there, and it's going to clean off any you know, carbon or anything else that is in between the valve and the seat on the cylinder head. So I'm gonna go through and get all those done, and yeah, then we'll be able to move on to putting the springs and retainers in. All right, so I'm just gonna pull this out. So there's like a whole bunch of little specks all along the inside of the valve and also on the inside of the cylinder head right there. So I'm just gonna get a little bit of this on there. Just rub it around with my finger. Just like that. And then we'll put it back in. And then, you know, just go back and forth for a few seconds. It might take a couple minutes, especially on these exhaust ones right here, because they're always nasty. But I'm pretty much just gonna keep going until the surface of the cylinder head where it seats and the surface of the valve where it meets the cylinder head looks nice and clean. So I'll show you guys what that looks like. I'm gonna just pull it out real quick and see what it looks like. Just after a few seconds, it should already start to look much better. Oh yeah, that's already way cleaner, just like that. So that is just after a few seconds of grinding it back and forth. Already looking much cleaner. I'm gonna get this one all the way finished up, and then I will show just a side-by-side of a before and after, and then I'll go ahead and get the rest done from there. All right, so after about a minute, I got it pretty clean. As you can see, the one on the left is much dirtier. That is one I have not done yet, and all those little black specks are kind of like embedded into the cylinder head. That is completely cleaned off, like with brake cleaner and a paper towel. Those little black dots will stay there until they are, you know, smoothed out with the grinding compound. So looking a lot better right there, and you can compare the valves right here. The one on the right is the one I just did, and the one on the left is one that has not been done yet. So you can see these tiny little pits in the valve, and it just kind of helps clean all that stuff out, and helps make the valve make a much better seal to the cylinder head. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest done, and then we'll flip it back over and move on from there. All right, all the valves are cleaned off and ready to go, but before we put the new springs and retainers in, I figured it would be a good idea to put some new valve seals in this thing. I completely forgot about that. So we ran over to the part store real quick, and luckily they had some valve seals in stock. So we're gonna replace all those since we have easy access to them with everything being apart right now. And I don't know if you guys remember or not, but how I did it on my wagon. And an easy way to do this is just to take a blowtorch to all the old valve seals, get them like red hot, and then you can kind of rip them off with pliers. So if you try to do it without heating them up, it is like really hard to get them off. But for some reason, when you hit them with a torch, it kind of just melts the rubber out, and then you can pry the old one off, and then you just go through and pop the new ones on. So we're gonna go through and get all these old ones off with the blowtorch, and then put all new valve seals in this thing. Then we'll be able to put the valves back in and get the new springs and retainers in from there. That smells like crap. Just like
Easy
that.
does it.
Here's one. Okay, so once you get all the old valve seals off, you just push the new ones on and they're ready to go. You'll kind of hear them like click into place, or at least you'll feel it. Just kind of shove it down and it's ready to go. All right, so we got all the valve seals in, so I'm gonna put the valves back in. I just kind of have them in order of how they go back in, so we make sure they go back to the right hole. So we got all the valves back in, and we have the new valve seals put into place, and we also made sure to clean out any of the old material that we burned off from the old valve seals, because there was a lot of leftover pieces. So you just want to make sure you clean all that out. But we are finally able to install the new springs and retainers. So to do that, we're going to be using this tool that I got right here. This tool works the exact same way as the tool that I made for my wagon a while back, except this one is obviously much nicer and fits the H22. So how this tool works is it just bolts down to these existing holes right here that are used for like the camshaft cap. It just uses those pre-existing holes. You'll bolt it down right here, and then it comes with this piece that will sit underneath this screw right here. And pretty much what you do is back this screw all the way out, put this piece underneath there with the new valve spring underneath it, and you will tighten this screw down, and it will compress the spring and retainer, and this little window right here will allow you to get to the valve and let you put your little keepers back into place, which I have stored in this box right here. So this is kind of the hardest part of putting everything back together, is getting these two keepers put back into place. And real quick, let me show you guys how that works. All right, so I pulled this valve back out of the head real quick just to show you guys how this is all gonna go together. So right here, it's kind of hard to see, but there's like this little indentation on the end of the valve right there. And I have the new springs on the valve right now just resting on there. And how this is going to work is inside the cylinder head, this spring is going to be compressed up against another retainer underneath the valve, which is already in the head. And then this top one will go on like that. And then that valve spring compressor is going to compress this spring down. Sorry, it's so blurry right now. But that valve spring compressor is going to compress this top spring down, and it will leave the valve sticking up like how it is now. And then I have to take both of these little keepers and rest them against each other in this groove right here. They have like a tiny little lip on the inside of them, and that grabs onto this notch that's in the valve. So you'll get them both like this, like so. They sort of form like a little V shape, and then they rest into the retainer. So once those are both in the notch like that, then you can slowly let the spring, you know, have some tension against the retainer, and it will grab just like that. So right there, it's holding on tight, and that's pretty much how it works. So that spring compressor pretty much will just push this down so you can get to that, and then, you know, get the keepers where they need to be. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this valve back in, and we're gonna get all these springs and retainers installed into the head. All right, so that right there is the top of the valve. I'm just gonna try to drop the keepers in with my fingers. It might be a little tough. This is the most tedious part about doing this right here. It's really nice to have a magnet as well. All right, so I had to finesse them a little bit. Not sure how well you can see that, but both of the little keepers are in place right now around the valve. And as I slowly loosen the valve spring compressor, they should pop into place. So I'm gonna do that right now, just go slow. You'll kind of see them sink into place. Yep, I'm going right in. And just like that. So now I can back this bolt all the way out. And then that guy will come right out. And that one is done. So then I just have to do it to the other side, and then, you know, unbolt this part, move it over to these two bolts right here, and just keep going all the way down until they are all put back together. Probably gonna take a good amount of time to get everything back together, but we're gonna keep going until this head is ready to go. Boom. We are done with the springs and retainers. Just flip all these back down. Nice. So now all we have to do is put the cams back in and, you know, put the caps back on and tighten everything down. And
put it on the block.
Yep. So need to get a head gasket first though. I did mention in a previous video that I was gonna possibly get this thing resurfaced or, you know, decked on the bottom, but honestly the head gasket off of this motor, I don't know where it's at, the used one, yeah, it actually looked like it was in really good shape, so I don't think it's really necessary to get this resurfaced. I really don't think there's any reason this head right here should be warped in any way. When I bought this, the only issue with the motor was that it had a slight rod knock. And when I took it apart, it was just barely messed up. The bearing was barely even smushed, and the guy said it ran fine other than the knocking. And I've never had an issue with my hatch blowing head gaskets out, and I really don't think it will be necessary on this. So I bet everything's level. We'll find out, I guess. I'm just gonna run it as is, get a new head gasket on there, and she should be good to go. But yeah, I don't think it's gonna be warped or anything like that. It should be flat. And this is the head that goes with that block anyways. So it's not like I'm putting a different head on a different block. So, you know, just another reason why I think it should be all right. But the head is all together as far as the springs and retainers go and the valves. And yeah, this definitely took a lot longer than we thought. So we're gonna call it there for tonight. But they do look good in there. So we have the new Super Tech dual springs and retainers with the titanium retainers in there. And yeah, this thing's gonna rip. Take her over 9,000 RPM for sure. But yeah, then tomorrow I'll probably get everything put back together. I also just noticed that this cap right here might need to be replaced because it's kind of broke. That guy right there, it's kind of broke. So I probably have an extra one laying around that I can use. But hopefully that's not a big deal to use extra or different cam little girdle things on a different head. I don't know if the machining is like different, so I might just YOLO it. But anyways, get this thing done probably tomorrow and probably get the head put onto the block. And then, you know, just try to get some parts for the block, get the oil pan back on it, and kind of go from there. I still need to get the timing belt and the manual tensioner for the timing belt, which I should be getting pretty soon. And then once I get all that, I can get the timing belt on, and then we can start putting the tranny on, put the clutch on, obviously first, and then it won't be long from there until we get the motor dropped into the van. But yeah, got the head done today, and that's gonna be it for this video, guys. So I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.